Udjurununakul put it simply but beautifully. This land was ours, you may recall, before you came along at all. In celebrating the elders of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people today, I also pay my respects to any Indigenous people present. And I also want to take a moment to specifically acknowledge the people of the Torres Strait. The people of the Torres Strait can't simply be a pro forma addendum to our standard acknowledgement of country. As Australia under the new government rightly focuses on the challenges of climate change in the Pacific, we can't forget that many of our own citizens are facing exactly the same challenges in the Torres Strait. We can't forget it, and under this government we won't forget it. When I leave the Press Club this afternoon, I'll be flying directly to the Torres Strait to talk with elders and owners about the impacts of climate change on them and their country. I'm delighted I'll be joined by my colleagues Senator Jana Stewart and Nita Green, and also by the Assistant Minister for Climate Change and Energy, Jenny McAllister, whom I've asked to have carriage of climate adaptation. And Jenny's also joining us in the room today. Well, it's tempting to say that May 21 saw the winds of change blow through our country. But in fact, a gale blew away 9 years of climate delay, denial and dysfunction. After years of climate change policy being weaponised by Conservatives, after years of baseless fear campaigns about the cost of climate action, there was a climate election, and that election resulted in a Labor victory with an ambitious climate agenda. Of course, real victory on climate doesn't come on election day. Real victory comes with achievement in government, with progress in policy and with a focus on delivery. And today I'm going to focus on Labor's approach to delivery and achievement in climate. Now, of course, as Andrew said, I have had a busy few weeks as Minister for Climate and Energy. You might have noticed. And I'll say a bit about this at the outset. We've seen, in dramatic form in the last few weeks, the real-life results of that delay, denial and dysfunction when it comes to energy policy. This really has been a tailor-made crisis. 9 years of stop-start policy making, direct action, an attempt to abolish and then water down the renewable energy target, an attempt to abolish and then constantly undermine ARENA and the CEFC, an aborted clean energy target, a discarded national energy guarantee, the demonising of renewables, the disparagement of storage as being as effective as the big prawn, campaigns of denigration against companies and CEOs who dared to argue that a well-managed transition to renewables was important, the former government's signature energy investment, Snowy 2.0, running 18 months late. They knew this, of course, before the election, but hid it from the public and from the market, which needs this information to make decisions about new investments. In their final year in office, they oversaw one of the biggest spikes in emissions in 15 years, 4.1 million tonnes. That is their legacy. We know that good climate and energy policy is also good economic policy. It doesn't rely on recession and drought for short-term and temporary emissions reduction. It locks in meaningful emissions reduction. They also knew, of course, that electricity prices were skyrocketing on their watch, but they cynically decided to leave it to the new government to announce the increase in the default market offer. They weren't just incompetent, they were dishonest about it. And all this came at a great cost to the country. A dive in renewable energy investment, not enough investment in storage, not enough investment in transmission. And further uncertainty was created for the market through their announcing of the underwriting New Generation Investments program, which hasn't seen a single watt added to the market. Lots of big announcements, but not 1 watt of generation funded or underwritten by the previous government, despite all the spin. This was the worst of all worlds. They managed to chill private sector investment by announcing that they would invest, but then they didn't actually deliver any of that investment themselves. Now we see the results. And by their early actions, the now opposition are making themselves irrelevant to the debate. No recognition or contrition for their actions. More denigration of renewables by the new leader of the opposition. A unilateral declaration by him, with no reference to his party room, that the opposition will not support the government's climate change bill, despite the benefits for business of enshrining certainty. Bizarre and laughable claims that somehow the new government even talking about renewable energy somehow spooked coal-fired power generators into not working, and an economically illiterate attempt to argue that the answer to high power prices is to introduce the most expensive form of energy that also takes many years to build, nuclear. And so the opposition has chosen to count themselves out of a sensible discussion on the most pressing issue facing our country, climate change and energy. I was interested to see if some bipartisanship was possible in relation to one of the biggest transformations our economy has ever been through. I would have been interested to pursue that. But if their contribution over the last month is anything to go by, they appear not to have received the memo from the Australian people issued on May 21st, and they have, by their own actions, made themselves irrelevant in this debate. And so, enough about them. To the future. The key to our approach in government and the key to Australia's success were the same principles that underpinned the Powering Australia policy and our successful election campaign. Namely, a focus on the economic opportunities for Australia of a real, well-designed climate action and well-integrated industry and economic policy. Bringing Australians together from the regions to the cities, from the renewable sector to traditional energy, an end to the toxic politics of identity, of division, an effort to divide Australians against each other on the matter of climate change, an effort to ensure that the economic dividend of real action on climate change is fairly spread across the entire country. Working with business to unleash the pent-up private investment in energy generation, which has been waiting for a government that gets it, waiting for a government that understands the need to provide sensible and stable policy frameworks. Working in partnership with all other governments and those who have a stake to drive this once-in-a-century transformation. And a commitment to a carefully designed and ambitious but achievable set of policies which ensure our approach is both credible and substantive. That approach marked our election campaign. That approach will mark our tenure.